This radio station.
So go and go tell them we not bow down leg. You must be mad, we could not do that. Foundation from birth. Here man, a low culture. Say, we're representing for the vice of the Caribbean, Jamaica and far beyond.
Yo, it's Shaggy. It's Voice of Caribbean. 102.1 Shaggy on your dial, wicked and wild. I made them know that. Yeah.
24 hours of the best Caribbean music. You're listening to WZPP.
The new 96.1
FM. It's Old School Throwback Thursdays on WZOP. WZPP Radio.
Yes, good afternoon and welcome. It's the Old School Throwback Thursday. Yes, we will be jamming all throughout the day. Wagwan, wagwan. Big up everybody listening from Miami, wagwan. 94.3 FM. What's up, North Miami, Hollywood, 96.1 FM. And Fort Lauderdale, what's up, 92.7 FM in Fort Lauderdale. Wagwan, everybody. Happy that you're here. Suzette Speaks, live on your radio. Your attorney and hostess with the mostest right here on Voice of the Caribbean Radio. We're talking hot topics, social media trends, news you can use. We do a little edutaining around here. We try to, meet the people where they are, give you stories that matter the most, and of course that matter to you. So we're here. I want to big up everybody watching online, everybody watching on the app, and all across social media. You can follow us, Voice of the Caribbean. Of course, you can follow me, Suzette. 1Z, 2 T's, Speaks with an S. Suzette Speaks in the building. Wagwan, wagwan. I'm so happy you're here. Was talking about Jeffrey Epstein just a little bit because as I've been telling my audience here on my YouTube side, listen, I'm not as enthused about it. Of course, people have very strong feelings. So I'm covering it here as a result of what I'm reading online. And according to the USA Today, that an article that came out today on USA Today about a Quinnipiac poll. This is what is kind of happening here. A new Quinnipiac University survey released on July 16th shows almost 2/3 of voters disapprove of the Trump administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case. That's 2/3. 2/3 of voters disapprove of the Trump administration's handling of the case. Another highlight, key point of the survey that came out yesterday, only 17% of registered voters approved of the Trump administration's actions in the Epstein case versus 63% who disapprove. Right? Trump and other top administration figures have they ginned up expectations. It was them who said there was a list. It was they who claimed that they had it on their desk. Hello. And made it seem as if they would get to the bottom of it if they were elected. It was the very same people who are now in office that made these claims. And of course, these allegations now are not being substantiated and voters are upset. There are people who are even in the very loyal base of Mr. Donald Trump who are now questioning, are you a part of the conspiracy? They're not liking it. And the poll numbers per this Quinnipiac University poll is bearing it out. So because these top administration officials, including Mr. Trump himself, kind of set these high expectations, right, that there was going to be these blockbuster revelations in the Jeffrey Epstein case. And they're trying to say now, oh, there's no list. There's nothing to see here. He took his own life. It's done. Please pay attention to something else now. It's not working. It's just not working, y'all. The Justice Department and the FBI have now said the case is basically closed. And voters are not as comfortable with that. Only 32% of voters in the poll approved of Attorney General Pam Bondi's role in the Epstein controversy. So what does this mean? It means that voters don't look like they're too happy, not at all, with how President Donald Trump's team is dealing with the controversial Jeffrey Epstein case. And they're calling it a MAGA family feud. Is it a family feud? Is that what's happening? As the MAGA family feud over the deceased financier's sordid past continues to divide Republicans. This is according to USA Today. A new Quinnipiac University survey released just yesterday shows almost 2/3 of voters disapprove of the administration's handling of the case a week after the Justice Department and the FBI released no new files and concluded that the convicted sex offender died by taking his own life in his jail cell. Just 17%, only 17% of registered voters gave Trump and his administration a thumbs up when asked about the Epstein fallout versus, like I said again, 63%, according to this poll, who gave them a big old thumbs down. The president is working overtime to smother the fire, smother the divide, expressing bewilderment and anger at his supporters' fixation on the Epstein case. This is per USA Today. Mr. Trump was quoted as saying, "I don't understand it. Why are they so interested?" Is he for real? Why are they so interested? Trump told reporters on July 15th, "He's dead for a long time. He was never a big factor in terms of life. I don't understand what's the interest or what's the fascination is. I really don't." That was Mr. Trump a couple days ago. On July 16th, just yesterday, the president lashed out on his platform, Truth Social, over what he called the quote-unquote Jeffrey Epstein hoax, railing at, quote, "My past supporters have bought into this BS." Not quoting him, he said the word. You know, this president a little bit uncouth. That his past supporters have bought into this beep beep hook, line, and sinker, unquote. The Quinnipiac poll shows an almost even split among GOP voters. That would be 50-50, with 40% approving compared to 36% disapproving, with another 24% saying that they don't have an opinion. Democrats and independents overwhelmingly, not surprised, have expressed displeasure, with 83%, that's Democrats, and 71% of independents showing their disapproval respectively. Listen, we're going to stay on top of this. Again, I want to move on to Alligator Alcatraz. There's still people being held in what apparently is such inhumane conditions that they're in a giant cage with 30 people in there. It's a couple dozen people in each cage. Not able to see outside. Only able to eat one meal a day. Many are saying, reports are saying, that the meal is has worms and flies. That's from alleged detainees that are out there that got cell phones and are reporting back to people on the outside. This is what they're seeing. But I want to take the word of a couple of state representatives. And Congress people. So, like as I was saying before the break, this past Saturday, the Florida Department of Emergency Management and others, a part of the Ron DeSantis, the governor and his administration, invited Florida lawmakers, all, right, whether they were elected to go to Tallahassee or elected to go to Washington, D.C., right, to come for a tour. So several Congress people, the people who go to D.C., went out to Alligator Alley on Saturday. Alligator Alley. That's a real road. Alligator Alcatraz. There you go. On Saturday to this detention center called Alligator Alcatraz, as well as several state legislators, the people who serve us in Tallahassee. So I'm going to start with Maxwell Frost. He's a congressman out of the Orlando area. And this is what he had to say. It was, again, very troubling. I'm going to see if hopefully I can get this going. And this is what he said while in Washington, D.C., what he saw. And he described it as an internment camp, which is a very, very strong language. And we're going to hear it for himself. I'll play a little now.
Today to shine light on a moral atrocity going on in my home state of Florida. An immigrant internment camp that Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and his administration have propped up in the middle of an abandoned airfield deep in the Florida Everglades. A place where nearly 1,000 humans are being forced to live in a tent city in the middle of the hot Florida summer, hot sun, where folks are not getting enough food. Detainees are exposed to the heat, wildlife, mosquitoes that can potentially carry disease, stripped of their civil rights, and as of this past Saturday, cut off from legal counsel.
Again, I'm playing a clip. This has been posted on the New York Post YouTube, showing Representative Congressman, Democrat from Florida, Maxwell Frost, detailing what he saw during his tour of Alligator Alcatraz, the new detention center that was built by the Ron DeSantis administration using, and I have to make sure I get back to the article that talks about the alleged funds, the disaster recovery funds in the Florida budget that have been redirected towards Alligator Alcatraz. Now, disaster recovery, we know that, again, hurricane season started and we are prone. It's been kind of quiet, knock on wood, but we don't know what the rest of the season, it goes all the way to the end of November, is going to hold. So Florida has designated disaster relief funds in its budget. And I'm reading a report that is now saying that some of those disaster relief funds have been redirected and reallocated to the building and maintenance of this detention center, Alligator Alcatraz. I'm going to read some more of that, but let me have Maxwell Frost continue on what he's calling a detention center and an internment camp. His words, based on what he saw from the tour he took over the weekend.
And while this humanitarian nightmare unfolds, soulless politicians like Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump, Kristi Noem, grin and call this place. I'm actually not even going to use the name that they're calling it and dignify it. But they sell merch, they make jokes, they print hats with cartoon alligators dressed up as ICE agents, and they laugh as people and families are suffering.
Now, I want to ask you, how do you feel about that? That there is a whole merchandising now taking place where they're selling T-shirts and hats and other paraphernalia that says Alligator Alcatraz on it, with gators holding, like looking like ICE agents. It's disturbing, to say the least. But let me let Representative Congressman Maxwell Frost continue.
I can tell you the amount of constituents I've heard from. Their dad is in this facility. I haven't heard from them for weeks. No one with an eyes and a conscience can ignore what this really is. It's an internment camp, a place full of people who look like me, Latinos, Haitian men, subjugated to inhumane conditions under the guise of immigration enforcement. It's disgusting. It's un-American. It demands oversight. Members of Congress have a legally protected right to conduct oversight of immigrant detention centers. That means that we have the power to show up unannounced, as I have on other occasions, and see what's going on with our own eyes. That was my plan and the plan of my fellow Florida congressional Democrats last week. We were ready to do our jobs. Somehow word got out to the DeSantis administration that we were showing up, and so they decided to invite us at the same date and time we were going to show up anyway. But we took them up on that. We went in the facility, and
once again, for those who are just joining, welcome. This is Suzette Speaks Show, playing a clip on the House floor where Representative U.S. Congressman Maxwell Frost is talking about his visit and what he saw at the Alligator Alcatraz, the so-called Alligator Alcatraz detention center in the middle of Everglades that are holding up to 1,000 detained folks who have not had proper documentation to be in the United States. And he's talking about some of the things that are concerning him about this facility.
Here to talk a little bit about my experiences in there. The state of Florida and DHS, they got wind of our visit. They got scared. They invited us. And of course, what we got was a sanitized version of the way things usually are. But even that sanitized version, to me, was abhorrent conditions. I also heard reports that the night before we showed up, magically the detainees got their first shower they had in a while. Magically, they got one of their first actually good meals. And it just shows why the unannounced visits are so important to see how things.
So he's saying that right before he went, detainees in the Alligator Alcatraz facility in the middle of the Everglades have been saying they were not allowed to shower for days. Not allowed to brush their teeth. Some of the things that we take for granted just as a human being. Wash your hair, shower your body, wash off the dirt from your face, brush your teeth. But magically, before the scheduled visit that took place last Saturday, they all of a sudden got food and all of a sudden were allowed to shower.
Really are, but I got to tell you, a clean cage is still a cage. And at the end of the day, in this facility, we have 32 men being crammed in each cage, about 4 to 6 cages in each tent. Each tent, we brought a thermometer in there, was about 84, 85 degrees, of course, in the hot Florida sun. I'll always remember walking in that front door and looking at these gentlemen in there, everyone screaming for help. One guy asking me to call his family. He was screaming out a phone number. I couldn't hear him. I couldn't get all the digits down. Only 3 sources of water per cage. They're the spigots connected to the toilets, much like the jail units we've seen. But usually in those jails, it's one of those units for 2 to 4 people, not 3 for 32 people. But I got to tell you, one of the most emotional parts for me was when we looked at the cages from afar. We weren't let in the tent, but standing at the doorway, hearing those chants, freedom, freedom, libertad, people yelling. This isn't security, it's cruelty. It's not immigration policy, it's dehumanizing people. Trump said this was about keeping people safe. He said it's about going after criminals, but we all know is one big lie. Hundreds of the people being held in this internment camp have no criminal charges. I won't stay silent while our government turns the Everglades land, of which protecting it used to be a bipartisan thing, and the state is spending $450 million from our Division of Emergency Management to run this internment camp. And we're in hurricane season. I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, I don't care what you are. The state, the Division of Emergency Management has the ability to spend up to $500 million without going to the legislature and emergency money. They're going up to $450. We're about to go into hurricane season, which means that when a hurricane is barreling towards our state, they're not going to be able to do what they need to do immediately to save lives because every minute matters. They'll have to go back to the legislature and beg for more money because they spent $450 million of our money on a damn internment camp in the middle of the Everglades.
Let me pause it there. You're listening to Congressman Maxwell Frost of Central Florida. He's talking about what he witnessed, 32 people per cage inside giant tents, 4 to 6 cages inside each tent, 3 spigots of water and 3 that were tied to the lavatory, the toilet seat. Usually, as he said, in correctional facilities such as a jail, there's 2 people per toilet. Here it's 32 per about 3. He's talking about the temperature inside of each tent. They took thermometers with them, 80 plus, 85 plus degrees in the middle of the Everglades inside a sweltering tent. It's not a game. Not being able to bathe, not being able to brush your teeth, not being able to eat more than once a day, if that. Food being allegedly infested with maggots and worms. As he said, mosquitoes, we know all too well, coming from the region that we come from, carry disease, right? From Zika to whatever. And they're in the middle of the Everglades, surrounded by basically the river of grass, water. I also want to talk about what Congressman Maxwell Frost brought up, which is the funding piece, $450 million that is coming out of the state emergency management. Now, I was reading, this is being I'm talking about an article from Talking Points USA, Talking Points memo. And just looking at where the funding is coming from for this, it makes contracts, as the article is titled, contracts show millions of dollars have been diverted from disaster resources to be used at Alligator's Alcatraz. The title says contracts show millions of dollars and diverted disaster resources were used to build DeSantis' Alligator Alcatraz. That's what the article says. TalkingPointsMemo.com. TPM has obtained and analyzed over a dozen contracts and invoices related to the construction and operation of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' so-called Alligator Alcatraz, the migrant detention camp in the middle of the Everglades. The documents identify 8 previously undisclosed companies, including 2 firms with a Fortune 500 pedigree, involved with this controversial facility. The article goes on to say they also show that in at least one instance, resources allocated for the state's, quote, disaster preparedness, where we use money that's set aside by the Florida House and the Florida State Senate for emergencies for the people of Florida, right? Disaster preparedness. That resources allocated for the state's disaster preparedness apparatus were diverted to the site, that's Alligator Alcatraz, as DeSantis' offices used emergency powers to quickly establish the camp. causing a shortfall that needs to be addressed during the ongoing hurricane season. Listen, I'm almost out of time, but this is what Congressman Maxwell Frost, who was one of the many who took the tour this past Saturday in the middle of the Everglades at the detention facility where over 1,000 people are being held in the middle of the Everglades on a former airport landing strip, a piece of slab of concrete, a slab of pavement that was out there, that they hastily constructed this tent city that is now holding up to 1,000 people allegedly, who even one person, and I didn't even get to play. Let me see if I can play a little bit of State Senator Chevron Jones from Miami talking about it. This is him on MSNBC talking about what he saw in the cages. His first-hand account. I'm going to play just a quick. We got about a minute left. Let me play just a little bit of it.
All of what is happening in that facility.
Well, Simone, the truth be told, they don't know who's in charge, because when we first went in on July 3rd, they said that this was a state-run facility. But it wasn't until we got there a few days ago, until now they said that it's a federal-run facility using ICE procedures to run the facility. But mind you, they're using $450 million of taxpayer dollars. When we first got there on a few days ago with my colleagues and congressional members, we walked into the facility through the intake area where we began to see many of the detainees that were sitting down on a bench, shackled by their hands and shackled will have chains on their stomachs. But make insult to injury, what we heard was individuals saying, "I was just on my way to work. I'm an American citizen." But the most heart-wrenching part is when they took us and they opened up the door to where the detainees were. 32 individuals inside a cage. It was 81 degrees at the place where we were standing, knowing that inside it was probably even hotter. How do I know? Because there was individuals that were sweating and they had their shirt off while they chanted "Liberty."
Listen, I got to stop it there. I'm out of time, y'all. I appreciate you so much for watching online, listening on the radio, listening on the app. There's so much we have to do to protect our brothers and sisters who are caught up in this type of situation. Alligator Alcatraz. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. Stay tuned. We got Lisa B coming up next. This is a Fire Throwback Thursday. And I appreciate you guys rocking with us. Much more here on Voice of the Caribbean coming up. Suzette Speaks signing off. Thank y'all for listening. I appreciate you. I'll see you tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Take care.
This Friday, admission is free. That's amazing. Fridays, every Fridays, inside of Club I-9. Thanks.